Good evening, and welcome to the panel on the changing geography of manufacturing. My name is Anand Stanley, and I'll try to make this panel. I'm quite confident with this esteemed panel that we have. We will make this more riveting than the wardrobe launch that we just had. I would like to briefly and quickly talk a little bit about what we are going to discuss about in terms of the panel, give you a little bit of a background of just from an Airbus perspective, how we look at this, and also try and get some perspectives from a lot of my colleagues. We have an OEM here, that is Embraer. I mean, Adam will be able to talk a little bit about the Embraer perspective. We are very, very fortunate that along with two OEMs, we have 3 engine manufacturers. So I can assure you, we will be fully powered and propelled through this conversation. This is the first time I've seen 3 engines on the same panel, which is Rolls-Royce, GE, and Pratt & Whitney together. We have spoken a lot about a lot of the evolving technologies, the evolving disruption, a lot of the exciting things that can happen. But let's not forget that the bread and butter of aviation and what actually powers the growth is still the traditional aircraft, which are the Airbus 320s and the Boeing 737s, which are the foundation workhorses of the growth. To give you a little bit of background about myself, I have started my career at Pratt & Whitney, worked at United Technologies, worked at the helicopter manufacturer Sikorsky, and then Lockheed Martin, and worked a fair amount in the MRO and manufacturing side in the US, in the Middle East, in Asia, and in Europe. So I'm looking at the perspectives from global geographies and how they've been changing all over the world. I can also talk about how Airbus itself is reinventing itself. What do I mean by that? Many of you have heard about Industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. 3.0 is automation, and 4.0 is really when we are talking about machines that are completely connected, which are intelligent, which are using AI and able to communicate with each other. At Airbus itself, we have been trying to use these factories. In Hamburg, we have looked at 4.0 as Industry 4.0 factories, where we're able to do the manufacturing of multiple models of aircraft on the same factory line. And we're able to do quick robotic adjustments, intelligent adjustments, automated adjustments to be able to manufacture these aircraft. We're also looking at ALM, or 3D printing, where if there is a sudden part that is going missing or we have a long lead time for a part, how do we very quickly be able to manufacture the part using 3D printing as a replacement is something that we also use. Another technology that we're using in aerospace is cobots, which is we have a number of robots which are able to communicate with each other, which are able to do quick repetition jobs. And they're able to also communicate with human beings, and the human beings and cobots symbiotically collaborate with each other in our factories to manufacture equipment. We don't use this just for the civil aviation products. We also use it for our helicopters, for our space systems, for our defense systems. To give you a little bit of a background on how this goes. Now coming to India and trying to switch to the Indian manufacturing topic. What stood out the most to me in terms of a context and a backdrop was what our minister, Shri Suresh Prabhuji, said this morning was 8.1 billion trips. That is the number that stuck in my head, 8.1 billion trips. That's how many we take today in India, which is greater than the population of the world. Given that there is, in terms of actual ground mobility, I don't know if it is as large as India and China, that may be the largest amount of mobility that any single nation in the world looks at. Staggering. When we look at that kind of a number, 8.1 billion trips, and we look at the potential of that to be converted to aviation, given the amount of infrastructure investment that we're talking about, the growth is truly staggering, and the numbers have already been spoken about this morning. Now, with that kind of growth, there will be job creation. And with that kind of job creation, as we know, I was looking at, if you look at the GACA reports, which some of you have on your tables from the Saudi Arabia, they had put in a statistic about 1 in 5 jobs that are created are in the area of manufacturing, supply chain, or logistics in terms of aviation. There are other jobs also in terms of ground staff, in terms of tourism, and in terms of other areas. But 1 in 5 jobs go into footprint. So you take the 8.1 number, you look at the amount of trips that can be converted. We're talking about 1 billion plus trips. We're talking about aerospace growth. We're talking about India being the third largest ecosystem in the world. It's already the third largest domestic market in the world. Ecosystem in the world, Shri Jayant Sinha ji has already said in possibly as early as 3 years. So I've tried to set the stage in terms of what globally things are going on, what the growth potential of India is. And I'd like each of my colleagues to briefly introduce themselves. And then we will talk a little bit about what they think is the potential in terms of footprint outside of the numbers of growth in India, the footprint, manufacturing, and infrastructure, and potentially the job growths which lead to from or make in India or design in India or so on and so forth. So I'll now pass the mic on to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Vikram Rai.
Thanks, Anand. Firstly, I'd like to thank Ministry of Civil Aviation, FICCI, in organizing such a large-scale event. It's great, and the government is doing all the right things to kind of encourage and grow the civil aviation structure in India. So coming back to the potential, yes, we all agree that India is a huge civil aviation growth market. We've got about 600 aircrafts in service and about 700 on order. And when we always talk about manufacturing orders, we kind of focus our attention to 3 major areas. One is MRO, second is manufacturing, supply chain, and the third also aspect that we focus on is the research and development, which is also a job creating factor in any country. So just rewinding myself on the MRO, there is a lot of discussions of potential MRO opportunities in India. And I'll just like to highlight a few figures here. US has about 7,500 aircrafts in service and 2,500 on order. And they have about 15 to 17 full MROs. China has about 3,500 aircrafts in service and about 1,500 on order. They have about 4 to 5 full-scale MRO. So if you do a back-of-the-envelope calculation for every 700 to 800 aircraft, so there is one single full-fledged MRO. And glad that India has taken the right step in that right direction. In Nagpur, there is an MRO, Boeing, GE, and all the Airbus as well. So there is a lot of development on the MRO side here. We are taking steps in the right direction. And MRO development would also be a subset of growth in infrastructure. For example, airport connectivity, highways connectivity to kind of to manufacture complex engines, complex subset parts. And again, happy to say that we are taking steps in the right direction. Rewind a few years back, if you had to send an engine from point A to point B, you had to probably take it to Frankfurt and then come back. Now the things have changed. The highway connectivity is better. Coming down to, so yes, MRO is definitely a growth spot for us. Second is the supply chain. Again, with the growth in the ecosystem, companies have started focusing on developing their supply chain here. In even manufacturing aerospace components. GE is doing the same. In Pune, we have a multimodal factory where we have about 1,000 skilled workers who are participating in that, and we have about 21 supply chain partners who are helping us grow the aviation components system domain. And the third piece critically is the R&D. Given the technical talent we have, I think the aerospace companies can do well to utilize the talent to develop the next generation aircraft engine components. And again, GE is doing that. We've got a JFWTC Research and Development Center where we've got about 700 people dedicated to aviation on that. So all in all, Path, I think it's a good trajectory. We are headed in the right direction. It's just about continuing with the momentum.
Thank you, Vikram. I would like my colleague Justin to please introduce himself and give a few words on the good work they're doing, and what are your thoughts on, and how do you find, where does India fit into your strategy?
Thanks very much, Anand, and thank you very much for the organizers for allowing us to be here. I think Rolls is very proud of the inroads we've made in India in the last, just the last 10 years. I think we speak about manufacturing, particularly the 6 strategic partnerships that we've got for our supply chain in India do stand out as some of the finest manufacturing plants in our network anywhere in the world. And I think it's a testament to the skills that are in India. It's a testament to the fact that we call them strategic. We're in this for the long haul. We're not just jumping on the next low-cost opportunity. We know that the skills are in India. The workforce is highly trained, and we're continuing to invest. And I think the example is the 4,500 square meter plants, the partnership we have with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, making components not just for the aftermarket, but for brand new Trent engines that are rolling out the door as we speak. And I think that's something that's fantastic and incredible, and something that we're going to capitalize on in the years ahead. And I think if you look at some of the components as an example, the Trent 7000, they were designed here in India. Components are being manufactured here in India. And I think the support network and structures that we put in place in terms of our digital support out of our Bangalore office means that the factories are being supported by our R-squared labs in terms of troubleshooting. And also our engine health monitoring support's being driven out of India as well. So that you can start to see a real ecosystem of support and endeavor and passion for aviation centered in India. And I think that's, again, coming back to the talent side of it. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to run a factory, because there's just so much enthusiasm for aerospace and aviation in India. It's wonderful to see. It's a pleasure to recruit. And you do get and as a result of this, you get fantastic results. So I think it's something that we're going to continue into the future. And we're going to continue to expand our supply chain partnerships in OE and in MRO in the years ahead. So very exciting.
Thank you, Justin. I'd now ask my ex-colleague from Pratt & Whitney and my current colleague on this panel, Palash Roy Chowdhury, to please go ahead.
Stanley, thank you. Good evening, everyone. By way of introduction, I'm the head of Pratt & Whitney in India, as well as the chairman of the board for UTC India Limited. So I'll speak not only on Pratt, but a little bit about our other companies as well. Previous to this session, we saw a wonderful video of Air India and the aviation journey for the last 60 years. And I'm very proud to say that Pratt & Whitney has been an integral part of that journey. We have been partners of Air India for the last 50, 60 years. And even today, we are powering some of the leading airlines in India with cutting-edge technology. And while you may not know it, about half of every person, or all the flights in India, half of them are on Pratt-powered engines. So we have a very proud and long history in India. And as far as footprint is concerned, while Pratt does not have core manufacturing facilities in India, what we have started with are the building blocks. So design, research and development, and talent development are the areas that we have focused on in the last 4 to 5 years. So we have more than 2,000 engineers working in Bangalore and Hyderabad that are plugged into our global design methodology and product development teams across the world. Similarly, we do a lot of research and development work with organizations of higher learnings, for example, Indian Institute of Sciences. We sponsor chairs, we work with IITs and other leading institutions. We have also set up a world-class training center in Hyderabad, only the third of its kind in the whole world after the US and China. And it's becoming a center of excellence for aviation talent development in this region. And as a matter of fact, in the last 4 years, we are proud to say that we've already provided about 5,000 student days of cutting-edge aviation training and trained people from about 22 different nationalities. So we are proud of that effort. As far as manufacturing footprint is concerned, our sister concerns UTC Aerospace Systems that operates the Goodrich facility in Bangalore. We have a pretty large footprint there, about 2,000 people that are working on everything from brakes and landing gears to actuators to sensors, seats, emergency exit chutes. And we were very proud to say that last year we won the award for the largest aviation exporter from this nation. We were also the first one to get an article out under the US-India BASA so that we can directly ship our exit slides back to Toulouse to Airbus from our factories in Bangalore. So that's a wonderful success story in India. Similarly, while we have sold Sikorsky to Lockheed Martin over the last few years, the fact of the matter is that we were the ones who set up the Sikorsky manufacturing facility in Hyderabad a few years back in a joint venture with Tata's that manufactures the S-92 cabin, which is fully loaded and ships out. The entire supply chain of S-92 cabins manufacturing is now based out of Hyderabad. So we're very, very proud of that development also. And like my friends from GE and Rolls-Royce mentioned, we are always looking for new opportunities, whether it's engine leasing or MRO or development of the supply chain. And so far, the journey has been very successful, and we are very excited to be continue to be a part of this excellent growth story that's unfolding in front of us.
Thank you, Palash. My colleague Adam Young will now give a short intro on Embraer. Please go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, very good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, Stanley, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to speak here at this wonderful conference here in Mumbai. As the only OEM on the panel, I thought it right to take a bit of a step back. And before talking necessarily about manufacturing in the country, it's really important to talk about, well, for us, for Embraer's perspective, how do we get to that level where we start to have more presence in a country in particular? And it really comes back to the market. And by many accounts, the Indian aviation sector is absolutely booming. I believe all the other esteemed colleagues of mine who have been on this stage have said exactly that. And depending on whatever metric you look at, this is one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing market in the world. It's very dynamic, and recent government initiatives have encouraged expansion into new segments of the market, which have gone on to unlock massive latent passenger demand over the past 3 to 4 years. However, taking a bit of a step back, to the discerning eye, one would note that there are growing headwinds and clouds on the horizon. The heady days of 2016's low fuel prices are rapidly becoming something of a distant memory, and fuel is all but recovered to pre-2014 levels, rising nearly 30% in the last year alone. This has been further exacerbated by the depreciation, the continued depreciation of the rupee versus the US dollar, of which many airline costs are denominated. But this is really the paradox that we, as a small aeroplane manufacturer, see in the market. Despite cost headwinds, we still see yields, more simply fares, continuing to decrease, continuing to erode to now the lowest level in the world. And in fact, on the previous panel, RJ Singh of SpiceJet said exactly that. Some of the lowest yields, $50, $60 for a 2-hour flight. So what have we got? Well, yes, massive demands are being stimulated by low fares. This is driving airlines to consider purchase of ever larger aircraft. However, the wave of capacity addition, which we have seen and continues through 2018, has seen about 120 aircraft, excluding wide bodies, inducted into the domestic market. The vast majority of these, roughly 80% of that 120, are large narrow-body aircraft, leaving airlines with little choice but to deploy this additional capacity on ever thinner secondary and tertiary markets, owing, of course, to what you could say is an acute or critical slot limitation at the airports at the country's major metros. And this trend has been illustrated by the fact that there's been a substantial increase in city pairs served by narrow bodies, rising from about 170, which was constant until 2016, now to just shy of 300 today. So airlines are flying bigger planes on ever thinner routes. On the other end of the spectrum, of course, we've witnessed a lot of positive developments arising from the government's regional connectivity scheme. This, of course, was designed to stimulate 50% of an aircraft's capacity up to a maximum of 40 seats, which you would think would overwhelmingly favor aircraft in the 80 to 100 seat segment. Yet curiously, we've only seen new turboprops inducted to serve what are short routes as a result of the RCS, whereas we see larger narrow bodies continuing to serve very thin infant RCS routes. But I like to say, from every challenge can rise an opportunity. Embraer is the world's third largest commercial aircraft manufacturer, and we offer a market-leading aircraft and a wide range of market-leading aircraft in the segment up to 150 seats. Our current generation aircraft have demonstrated flexibility with 70 operators in 50 countries around the world, and we've delivered nearly 1,500 of our current generation E-jets since 2004. This pedigree of success continues with our latest E2 family of aircraft, which deliver almost 25% or in excess of 25% variable operating cost savings versus larger next generation narrow body aircraft. But where am I going with this? To close, India remains a country of massive opportunity, but this is a country of changing opportunity, and that opportunity will be ideally served using smaller jet aircraft. Today, there are some 90 city pairs in India with absolutely no direct services. Instead, they're served via one-stop itineraries through major hubs, which adds to congestion, it adds to slot shortages, and overall passenger inconvenience. Undeniably, there will always remain a need for large narrow-body types. However, we at Embraer see that the next round of sustainable, complementary growth in India can readily be achieved and seized using smaller aircraft. We at Embraer are resolute in our commitment to supporting the development of the Indian aviation sector and look forward to active engagement with like-minded partners to optimize yields, minimize costs, decongest the nation's hubs, and ultimately increase profits. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adam. I hope most of you are convinced that all of us are coming up with strong arguments as to not only why India is important, but also, how it actually creates a strong business case or argument within our own vision, our own strategy of each of our companies. To put it in perspective, one of the questions I hope you're asking in the audience is, okay, fine, India is important, but do you go around saying the same thing in country X and country Y and country Z? To be frank, the answer is no, and I'll tell you why. Airbus itself, as an example, is owned by 5 countries. It is which is France, Germany, UK, Spain, and there's a share from the country of Canada. By the year 2035 and 2040, I'm talking about plain real GDP numbers. India as a country, in terms of just pure GDP, is larger than these 5 countries. India is already today larger than France, larger than UK as of 2019 in pure GDP numbers. So this is not a single country anymore. It is a mega region in itself, India. It cannot be looked upon as just A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and at I, there is India. That's not the way it is. For Airbus alone, there are 3 key regions that they look at, just 3. One of them is the US, the second is China, the third is India, period. And how does that manifest itself? In the last 3 years, we have bought about $2 billion of parts and services in India. We have over 6,000 people here who are employed either directly or in our supply chain or in our manufacturing base. When you walk through almost any aircraft that is an Airbus, there'll be multiple parts there which are made in India. We talk about making it, I'm talking about right now, from 10 years ago. When they opened the door in New York City of an Airbus, the door was made in Bangalore. The lighting, the air-conditioned switches, they're made in India. A number of the parts have already been made in India for a long time coming. We've also moved beyond that to designing planes. The latest A330neo, which has just been launched, the 800, the first flight was just a month ago. The majority of that aircraft, a lot of the load designs, the flight dynamics were all done in India. We're beyond manufacturing. We design brand new aircraft. We've done satellite design in India for Airbus. We've done defense aircraft design for Airbus. We've done helicopter design for Airbus. So this is not a market anymore for Airbus. This is a base. And there's a difference between a base and a market. And on those lines, I'd really like to understand from my colleagues, especially in terms of not just manufacturing, but going beyond manufacturing. You know, Justin, what do you think about Rolls-Royce future factories? Where do you see yourself being India leapfrogging the rest of the world in terms of manufacturing?
Yeah, thanks, Anand. That's a great question. I think what we're seeing now, I mean, it's really exciting. It was difficult to understate it, to overstate it. The changes we're seeing in factories in terms of green button technology, where you know the amount of interventions you need to make something an exquisite gas turbine jet engine component are relatively limited. So increasing automation, robotics. But also this now increasing link with the digital sphere, where with machine learning and with analytics, you can now start to achieve levels of right first time in your manufacturing that were unheard of before. So you really start to attack scrap costs and all the rest of it. But I guess then it goes beyond that in terms of, well, what are we actually going to be making in the future? There's Rolls-Royce are championing an electrification strategy, which means that there will be a future where we'll be making increasingly amounts of electric components. I mean, it's not in our necessarily just in our aerospace business, but we've signed a partnership with our power systems business around creating with Force India around a hybrid power pack. So we know it's going that way. So there's this opportunity to leverage a fabulous talent base in India to build factories from the ground up that almost leapfrog everywhere else, because you're not trying to refurb or redo brownfield sites. It's all brand new stuff, and I think there's this perfect sort of merger of digital talents, engineering talents, and that allows you to do fantastic things. And it's not too many places in the world where you can go these days where people just love to study engineering. India is doing a fabulous job of that, and I think it's where a lot of the traditional Western countries are really struggling to recruit. I think India does not have that problem. It needs to be fostered, it needs to be encouraged, and it needs to go forward, because this is the future of manufacturing. It's going to be the synergy between the digital and the good old-fashioned making things sphere. So yeah, it's massively exciting. It really is.
Thank you, Justin. And just to put it in perspective, to highlight that, when you talk about Industry 4.0 factories, which are very rare, the lighthouse factories, there's only 16 factories in the world, only one in the US. And out of those 16, one of them is run by the Tata Group. And it's run, and they have one of the most advanced factories in the world. Bharat Forge, another company, Indian company, is trying to do the same kind of work. So we are at the pinnacle of what kind of success and things that we can do here. Palash, can you also talk about 4.0 and any other technologies and next generation manufacturing that Pratt & Whitney, or what do you see India that we could leapfrog in terms of our Make in India efforts?
Sure. Thank you. So Industry 4.0, or the fourth industrial revolution, is extremely exciting because it changes the paradigm about how we think about manufacturing. And that is a space where I see a huge potential for India, And let me spend a couple of minutes explaining why, so that all of us are on the same page. And Anand, you mentioned a couple of stages of the Industrial Revolution, but the first Industrial Revolution, as we all know, started about 200 years back when we put mechanical systems in place, harnessed the power of steam and water. The second Industrial Revolution happened early in the last century when we added electricity and started mass production, factory lines, so electromechanical systems. The last 30 years saw the third industrial revolution, which was essentially automation. How do we optimize individual elements of that value chain by putting machines in place of humans? The fourth industrial revolution that we are at the cusp of right now essentially means the confluence of cyber and physical systems, essentially network systems that talk to us, each other in real time and make real-time decisions based on data. So we're not proactive, but actually reactive, and therefore it drives efficiency. And the opportunity there is tremendous. If you look at some of the reports, the numbers are unbelievable. Gartner says that the IoT market, which is the Internet of Things, is going to be a $3.5 trillion market in the next few years. Similarly, these other components of the Industry 3.0, cybersecurity, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, each one of them has the potential to become a $150 to $200 billion market. And we are already seeing people investing in these technologies and showing some maturity in select technologies. Now, why I think India has a huge potential is because if you look at some of the core elements of Industry 4.0, cybersecurity, data analytics, cloud, digital networking, artificial reality, virtual reality, all of them are, in one way or the other, information technology enabled capabilities. And India has traditional capability in many of those fields. We also should not overlook the fact that India is also a very, very highly industrialized country. We may realize that or not, but today India is the 5th or the 6th most industrialized nation in the world. So if we were to bring those two capabilities together in the coming years, in an organized fashion, I see India taking a pole position in driving Industry 4.0. Therefore, that excitement. And we already see a lot of that happening in the automotive industry. And slowly, when the capabilities develop, we will see migration of that into the aviation space as well. Anand, I don't know how much time we have. Do you want me to continue or do you want to move?
I think it's been good food for thought for the time being. I want to actually, I have a follow-on because you got me really thinking. So we're talking about a lot of these futuristic technologies, right? And some of you in the back, I can already see those bells ringing, saying, wait a minute, we still have MRO activities today being done in Malaysia, being done in Sri Lanka. We've still got footprint opportunities that we have to focus on in the short term. And you guys are all talking about all the good stuff you're doing in terms of design in India, these digital factories in India, et cetera, et cetera. Which one is it? Which one should we be focusing on? Should we be focusing on Factory 4.0? Should we be focusing on robots and cobots? Or should we be focusing on brick and mortar MRO? So, I mean, Vikram, what do you think? Should we be focusing more on regulation and the bread and butter activities and growing the MRO sector, growing the the vanilla activities in India first? Or should we actually leapfrog and say, India, we are the top of the world in terms of technology. Let's double down on that and leapfrog everyone else.
Interesting thought, Anand. I think it's not one or the other. It's both things have to be run in parallel, because MRO is more of short-term, a low-hanging fruit, whereas what the colleagues described here is more of a long-term thing which we need to kind of progress on. So given India has made some good strides in the MRO, I mean, and I'll again encourage everyone to go to Nagpur and see the world-class facilities that the Air India engineering along with the other OEM partners have put in. So it'll be MRO, more kind of short-term, low-hanging fruit, and the industry 4.0 in the long run. But again, both have to be done together in parallel to see where we want India to be there.
Great, thank you. Adam, this is the last point. Any closing thoughts in terms of a strategy before, if permissible, we will open up to the crowd for a couple of questions, so that we could actually get a little more of a customized participation from the audience. But before I do that, Adam, I'd like to know any closing thoughts in terms of geography in particular, bringing us back to the beginning.
Yeah, I guess before we get to the Make in India component that I think all my other colleagues here were talking about, from Embraer's perspective, I think we first are looking at perhaps things like trained in India or maintained in India for our aircraft fleet. And that's really the focus that we have. And we have blueprints of this sort of approach all over Asia as a whole. As a matter of example, we have well over 100 of our E-jets operating in China, and we have invested massively in terms of MRO network, training facilities in that country. The same in Japan, where we have 44 of our aircraft currently operating as well. So really, we see, before looking long-term in terms of Industry 4.0 perhaps, our focus is very much on the here and now. We want to get fleet in the country, and from that we will get the presence in the country. Embraer is no stranger to putting boots on the ground in countries of focus. Myself, I'm an example of that, based in Singapore. We have a large team based down in Singapore, and we branch out all over the Asia Pacific, South Asia region. So that's really where we see the direction going from Embraer's perspective. And as I said earlier, we are focused and resolute in our commitment to building the aviation sector and market as a whole here in India.
Great. Thank you very much, Adam. If the organizers would be kind enough, we would like to see if the audience is willing to participate by asking any questions or comments. Please stand up or raise your hand.
Good afternoon. This is a little bit off of the topics you've already addressed, but these days one of the major technologies that have been coming into the world is blockchain. And blockchain has a huge potential for tracking of parts, maintaining quality, especially for parts that transfer across many, many different users over the course of their life. And India being a technology leader, I was just curious if anybody would like to comment on the opportunity for blockchain in the manufacturing space and on into services thereafter.
Just to repeat the question, it was regarding blockchain and its applications to the manufacturing world. If you folks have any thoughts, please let me know. Go ahead. I'll close out on this topic.
Yeah, it's a great question. And just, I guess briefly, I think it's probably, yes, it's going to happen. I think if you look at how certain lifed parts are tracked throughout their lives, it's done often with bits of paper. Gradually that's emerging into, things like electronic logbooks, but broadly speaking, it should give us the opportunity to preserve that one version of the truth. When you manufacture the part all the way through to the end of its life. So I think it's exciting stuff. I think we are looking closely at it and trying to see how we can make it real in the short term. But as a concept, it's definitely relevant, and actually it provides an opportunity to try and reduce some of the paper trail that almost inevitably follows a gas turbine component around on its travels. So yeah.
Just to comment on that, I mean, most of us in aerospace today, we are moving away from our grandfather's brick and mortar kind of mindset to really being technology companies. And one of the most fascinating things for us really is the use of data and data lakes. And Airbus has a product itself called Skywise, where we're basically looking at large data lakes of information on our equipment or whatever else it may be, and we're trying to analyze it using AI, machine learning, and we're trying to also use identifiers within it using blockchain technology. And what this does is it really enables us to not just do predictive analytics on things, but also be able to put in a lot of value and intelligence into what we are seeing. This translates into reliability, into predictive reliability, safety, et cetera, et cetera. So I think these you will see more and more as we talk about aerospace and technology, they're going to start becoming very, very synonymous because just plain aerospace companies will not exist anymore in a few years. We will be moving much more into data management. Any more questions? It seems like it's a fairly technical panel and people are a little hesitant, but I'm glad. Thank you, sir, for standing up.
I belong to Crane Aerospace and Electronics. My question is, most of you are already doing, I guess, the manufacturing in India, but do you have any specific strategy to build the supply chain in India, especially when it comes to complex engine parts?
Complex?
Engine parts.
Engine parts. I think all of us did give examples of existing supply chains in India that are fairly, extensive. I think all three engine manufacturers are doing, I'm speaking for them, a fair amount of complex engine parts, so to speak, from what they have discussed. But if any one of you want to raise your hand and double down on that, please feel free to have fun.
So yes, I echo what Stanley said. We are absolutely looking at developing a robust supply chain, manufacturing and support supply chains in India. And what we see is that there are certain parallel industries where India is very mature. For example, the automotive industry. We have various clusters. And in the training center that I described, in Hyderabad, we are first creating courses, bridge courses, to take people in the automotive industry and bring them to the aviation side. So teach them about aviation tolerances, special processes, certifications. Because please understand that even if you are a precision manufacturer today, for you to become aerospace qualified is about a 3 to 5 year process. And we are working with a number of partners in the country to take them through that qualification process, because we do intend to have a robust supply chain in the country.
Yeah, just to expand on the question, I think the plan, given the amount of activity going on in India, the plan is only to increase our supply chain base, which I mentioned. We've got about 21 supply chain partners with us. So, and again, the supply chain of aero engine components is a pretty complex one and a high quality one. So the amount of supply chain that you develop is of very high quality. So it helps the existing vendors kind of up their quality standards few notches, and it creates more and more jobs and opportunities for suppliers.
Thank you. I think we're running out of time. One last question, please.
Hi, good evening. A very nice panel to see all of you together, the leaders here. A small question on Industry 4.0, what you touched. If you could just touch about what vision we have for India in 4.0, because it is something that's happening now, and we believe India is in the position to contribute more to 4.0. So if you could just lighten up a little bit on that. Thank you.
Sure. So let me take that in terms of our universe, which is Airbus, right? So we have a supply chain which is already growing. We do multiple parts, components, systems. That's how far. We also have services, which is engineering pieces. We have proposed to actually start the manufacturing of aircraft in India, which this is a proposal with the Indian government, and all three proposals are on the military side. One is a fixed wing aircraft, and two are helicopter lines. And the partners for both of these areas, one of the partners is with whom we have made this joint proposal to the government is the Tata Group. And as I mentioned before, I'm not trying to give an advertisement for the Tata Group, but the Tata Group is very, very advanced in their own right. They have one of the 16 lighthouse factories in the world that they have created in line with the Tata Consulting Service. So I think the combination of Airbus and the Tatas, we hope to see something really fantastic coming here. So I will talk about a practical, pragmatic vision that starts within our controlled universe. And this is, of course, to come. This is a proposal. It is pending government approval, and it will take a timeline, but I'm confident it will come through. and we will all in this room have the joy of seeing something fly in India. That being said, I think as an industry itself, when you look at the Indian talent base in whether it's blockchain, machine learning, artificial intelligence, et cetera, if you look at just the technology people that you look at in Bangalore today, it's 4 times the number than all of Silicon Valley plus all of the East Coast, New York to Boston corridor. You combine all the people there, it's 4 times the number. So the fundamental foundation is there in India right now. It just has to be unlocked. And it's not a question of what the vision or strategy is, it's just a question of when. And it has to happen. We've seen it happen in the aviation sector, in the manufacturing sector also, it has to happen. I am bullish, and I think I have the confidence in the regulators and the government and Vicky and all of you in the room that you will make it happen. Any other parting comments, please?
Yeah, perhaps I could just add one additional comment to what Anand was saying there is, obviously, yes, the potential of the Indian market to manufacture at highly advanced levels is absolutely there. But as I touched upon in the address that I made earlier, I still think, or certainly it's the opinion of us at Embraer, that the market here, from an aviation perspective, is quite fragile still. We see airlines struggling. We see airlines having to deal with heightened cost environments, low yield environments, that perhaps the focus should be slightly more near term to get a little bit more stability in the operating model of the airlines before we certainly as an OEM would launch into deep evaluations and deep considerations of major manufacturing efforts in the country. That's our focus. Certainly the talent is there, don't get me wrong, but that's something that I think would be better suited for a longer term discussion with a near term focus on the sustainability and the sustainable growth of the aviation sector as a whole.
Okay, so I'll add a couple of examples from Pratt & Whitney. I'm sure you realize that Industry 4.0 goes beyond manufacturing, and it affects the entire value chain, right from customer demand to product fulfillment to ongoing field services. So what we are doing is digitizing the entire value stream and the end-to-end process. So we are making digital models of our parts, of our processes, of our machines, of the entire infrastructure that we have around the world of our plants into a network, so that we can, on a real time, analyze the performance of each and every machine, each and every plant, and also understand proactively when one machine goes down, let's say, in our Middletown facility in Connecticut, what impact will it have downstream in, let's say, a repair shop in Singapore, to minimize whiplash effect, to minimize supply chain friction, all of that. So that has a direct impact in India today. So that's a live example. Another example of Industry 4.0 when applied to a product is that our new gear turbofan engine is now fitted with about 5,000 sensors that provide terabytes of data for every flight that the engine makes, which affords us the opportunity to do real-time modeling of the engine, and we can therefore manipulate the thrust levels depending on the fuel burn in the engine on a real-time basis, which therefore helps us reduce 15-16% fuel burn. So these engines, we already have 97 aircraft in the country powered by these engines, and in the last 3 years that these engines have been flying in India, we are happy to report that we have saved about 180 million liters of aviation turbine fuel. So that's a live application of Industry 4.0 in India.
I've just been told by the organizers that we have a chance for one more question. And all of a sudden, the room is warming up, but a little late. And we have a VIP at the front also who will be upset if we don't call on him. So we might have to take 2. But can you please, I would like the organizers to please pick and choose one of the gentlemen with their hands raised up so that we can call on them.
Can I hear me? Yeah, hi, my name is Benjamin Péan. One question for you. The slogan today is flying for all, right? Fly for all. So it refers to inclusion and sustainability. You mentioned Industry 4.0. Innovation is not only digital. We know that. My question is, can you share some specific initiatives developed by manufacturers to combine societal initiatives with how can we unleash the full potential of aerospace in India? That's my question.
Sure. So let me just repeat that. You're talking a little bit about innovation being balanced with social initiatives or sustainability. Can I take a turn? Can I take a stab at what you had just said? Because Palash, what he had said. Because I live in Delhi, and I've got 3 small children, and one of the things that is on our mind in November and December is the environmental conditions in Delhi, and we talk about environmental impact and sustainability. And I think the minister also, Shri Suresh Prabhuji, this morning spoke about sustainability as something that's really important to us. What is impressive about these the product that Pratt & Whitney has come up with, and this is important for you to know, is it has a 15 to 20% fuel burn over the traditional engines. And that is an important point, because a lot of the environmental impact and carbon footprint we look at is because of fuel burn. And not to mitigate any of the Rolls or the GE engines, the new LEAP engines and the new Trent engines are coming up. They're also coming up in the same range. So I don't want to get slammed by my 2 other colleagues here. But my point being, these are significant numbers that we're talking about. Aviation in its own self is responsible for about 1% of carbon footprint globally, of carbon emissions. And whatever little we can do as it grows and takes a bigger chunk, right? 20% is a big number. And there are many other things we can also do in terms of corporate social responsibility. I'm sure all these companies here and our Indian colleagues, whether it's any of the airlines that we look at in the room, they're doing a lot also, and I would not undermine that. But I want to just point out to the fuel burn alone as one investment factor, which was primarily another area which is also there, which all 3 of them are working on quite a bit, is the sound impact, which is, don't underestimate that for engines, and how the noise pollution is also being impacted, because it impacts thousands and millions of people with all these airports, the sound pollution.
Yeah, just to add, just to clarify, all 3 engine manufacturers are working to get the fuel burn better, so that's one. The second is emissions. Probably all 3 engine manufacturers are working very hard to get the emissions to the Western class, world-class levels. And that to me is something very interesting, because these days where airlines do their engine selections, in India also they look at the emission standards. So again, all 3 are investing in fuel, better sound, better emissions, which in fact is helping reduce the pollution levels.
Well, before we close, I can clearly say there is a ominous sign that we have to wrap up. And while we are about to do that, I would like to thank, first of all, the Ministry of Civil Aviation for organizing such a splendid event. We are very grateful to the leadership of the Ministry of Civil Aviation and all the other authorities. I would also like to thank the government and of the state of Maharashtra. I would also like to thank FICCI for bearing the burden and the brunt of putting all these logistics together in such a short time frame. And I'd like to thank the 3 engine manufacturers for their efforts for emissions and fuel burn, and my colleague there, the OEM with Embraer. And last but not least, thank you for being a wonderful audience and being patient and being very respectful and engaged through this process. Big thanks to all of you.
Thank you to the Honorable Moderator and all the panelists of this session. Thank you very much.